Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the MLB podcast. I'm Steve Buchanan. As you'll see, joined once again by Garion Thorne. Julian is taking his 5th vacation of the month, and yes, it is only July 2nd, so Garion has been able to step in, take his spot, hopefully permanently at this point, because I'm tired of trying to work around Julian's schedule. But Garion's here to talk about some MLB, some NFL going on this week as we slowly get through the month of 2020. The year of 2020. Sports is starting to creep back in just a little bit. We actually have some decent news to talk about. We're going to start over with the NFL with the signing of Cam Newton to the New England Patriots. Now, reports are out there that he's not guaranteed the starting job. Give me a break. Or Brian Hoyer is going to beat him out. And this is a signing that I think a lot of us, Garion, saw coming down the pipeline here. The Patriots did their best to kind of stave off. They didn't seem all that interested in the beginning, but obviously as the demands came down for Newton's contract, he just signed a contract where he's guaranteed $550,000, could make up to $7.5 million if he hits all those incentives and the bonuses. This is clearly a low-risk gamble move for the Patriots. I know you're a big Dolphins fan, so probably not the best signing for your kind of loyalty here, but no matter who you are, you have to like this signing, at least for Cam Newton as a football player.
Yeah, I think that for anyone who's a football fan, you're just kind of happy that we can sort of pencil Cam Newton in to actually be playing in a handful of games this season. I too think he's 100% going to be the starter, and unless something goes drastically wrong in training camp. And even considering, he hurt himself in a preseason game last year, so you might even want to be pretty careful with that too.
Right.
I don't think he has to win this job necessarily. I think it's his job. And look, he's been better than people want to admit more recently than they're willing to kind of stipulate. Like, everyone goes to 2015, which is fair. That's his MVP season. Like, that's a good starting place. And we say it's 6 years from that season. That's true, but 2018 was a pretty good year. If you roll through some of the advanced statistics, whether it's net yards adjusted per attempt or his completion percentage or his quarterback rating, there's a pretty good case to be made. It was his second best season, at least as a pocket passer in comparison to 2015. And I don't know. I just think my perspective on this as a Dolphins fan, like you said, in January, maybe early February, I just remember thinking, first and foremost, if the Dolphins don't draft Tua, I want them to punt quarterback and just sign Cam. Or option 2 was, I don't care where he goes as long as the Patriots don't get him on the cheap. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. So if my long-standing fear of the Patriots do everything right holds true for the 21st consecutive season, I think this is going to work out pretty well for them. And I think Cam's going to have a pretty good season.
Now, let's just play devil's advocate here. Let's just say, for whatever reason, the Patriots end up cutting Cam Newton. Now, for most teams, it doesn't seem like something that would happen. But with the Patriots, we've seen it happen before. I think it was last year or the year before, they cut Demaryius Thomas during the preseason as he was working his way back. Somebody that felt like was just a shoo-in to make the roster because of the talent that he has. When the Patriots did sign Newton, obviously their odds and everything shifted. Now they're plus 110 to win the AFC East. Are you still willing to kind of go with this narrative that he will be the starter and that these odds are set properly? Or do you want to kind of take a step back? Maybe there actually is a legit competition between himself and Jarrett Stidham, because sure, he might be healthy, but is he healthy enough to play at the standards the Patriots want him to play at? Are you still interested in these odds now that they're boosted? Or are you still looking to kind of wait and see how it pans out with Cam?
Unfortunately, I feel like the way this should have been played, and obviously hindsight is 2020, we should have just been betting the Patriots before this happened, realizing that they would do something in the best interest of winning. I think those rumors that the Patriots were trying to play for the first pick in 2021, that stuff was so weird and crazy. Like, Belichick, he's never going to admit it, but I think he wants to truly succeed this season. He wants to have a better record than the Bucs. So this is a pride thing, and I think they were always going to do well. And honestly, at this point, you might want to zag where everyone's zigging and just say, hey, Buffalo's still got a really good team. They've gotten a lot better since they were eliminated in the first round of the playoffs last year. if their number now gets to a nice point, if they can get back to like, I don't know, plus 160, plus 170 possibly, if the Patriots continue to be a popular play since the Cam signing, maybe that's where you go. But I do, again, I have a lot of faith in Cam. I have a lot of faith in the Patriots as an organization. I have a lot of faith in that defense, even though they did lose a couple of pieces from last year's squad. I don't know. I just think it's really funny to me. And I understand the argument because so much of Cam's game has been his athleticism and has been his ability to run. And the older you get, obviously it's harder to do that. But there's so many questions about like, oh, what's Cam got left in the tank?
Right.
And it's like the Patriots their quarterback position just got 11 years younger. And we're having this conversation about like, oh man, does Cam have anything left? It's like he's 31.
Right.
He just had a 42-year-old quarterback.
Yeah, and obviously it gives them such a different dynamic. I mean, that they can actually draw up plays where Cam runs. Like in an age of mobile quarterbacks, the Patriots have never, ever, ever been that for over 2 decades. Like this is going to be a whole different type of offense that we've never seen. Over on the DraftKings Sportsbook, and I actually just came across this as you were talking, there are a couple Cam Newton specials. And, I'm not going to ask you for your opinion on this, but they actually have who's going to have more passing touchdowns, Tom Brady, who is a minus 670 favorite, or Cam Newton at plus 470. Then another interesting one, Teddy Bridgewater, who's a slight favorite in this one, minus 134, or Cam Newton at plus 110. That's actually a pretty interesting one between Bridgewater and Newton. You're talking about two teams who don't exactly have the best weapons overall. I would say, actually, I would give the Panthers the edge over the Patriots in this one there. But if you're looking for some of those fun prop bets, check out the DraftKings Sportsbook. You can see some of these Cam Newton specials, comeback player of the year. All of those are available on the DraftKings Sportsbook, which leads us to our next topic we're going to talk about. MLB is set to come back later this month. We hope. The NBA is trying to come back. Already seems like there's a couple bumps in the road with some positive tests, which, by the way, everybody should have expected. Stop acting like none of these players are not going to be positive. Oh, they're going to cancel the season now. You can't actually say that nobody was going to come out of this with some positive tests. But we're just going to pretend that everything's hunky-dory and the MLB season is going to get off to a start without any issues here. But win totals for the upcoming season are currently up that you can potentially bet on here. I asked Garion to talk about one of his favorites. I'm just going to start off the jump here with the Indians over 32.5. This is a team I was not a big fan of over the course of the season. I thought they had a very tough schedule in the month of April, and they were a team that was very likely going to become sellers if they got off to a slow start. They have so many pieces that they can trade off. Francisco Lindor is one of them, maybe even some of their young guys in the rotation. We've already seen them kind of start a rebuild by shipping off Corey Kluber, who obviously didn't need to be moved, but it did help them get younger, get some guys in that farm system. So this is a team that I was not high on. With the schedule likely being as it is, going against their division, going against the NL Central, I think they have a legit chance to compete in this one. So I do like them over 32.5. Any quick thoughts on that total there?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of teams sort of clumped together in both the AL Central and the NL Central, right around that like 30.5 to 32.5 mark. And another one of the teams in there is the Chicago White Sox, and they're probably like a trendier team.
Yeah.
And I do like the over with the White Sox for many of the same reasons, just because they get to play the Tigers 10 times, because they get to play the Royals 10 times, because they'll probably get to play the Pirates 4 times, at least 3 times. So you're thinking already 23 of their 60 games are against arguably 3 of the 5 worst teams in baseball.
Right.
And it's putting a lot of expectation on them to say, hey, they're going to win like 17 of those 23. But if they can do that and just play 500 baseball against, the Indians, who are a good team, but they're not like the 2016 Cleveland Indians, the Twins, who are obviously very good, but you can poke some holes in their pitching and stuff like that. Like, I don't think the Twins are going to sweep the White Sox over 10 games.
Right.
I think Cleveland, Chicago, the Reds are a team that I know you like too. So
yep.
I think there's a lot of ways to experiment in that Central. And I think one of the divisions that's the complete opposite for me is the National League East. And that's why I know we differ on this, but I like the Marlins under 24.5 because someone just has to lose these games. And I do think the Marlins are better this season than they were last season. I think they went out and got some actual major league talent to stick in the middle of their lineup. Like Jonathan Villar is a great leadoff hitter. Corey Dickerson is sort of an undervalued bat. If he's batting third in your lineup, it's maybe not the greatest thing in the world, but he's at least a capable major league bat to kind of pair together with like Brian Anderson and create a nice little top three. Their pitching is young but intriguing. But you look at just how good the Braves are, the Nationals are, the Mets are, the Phillies were expected to be last year and maybe bounce back and become this season. And then, their games against the American League East, the Yankees, the Rays, Boston, Toronto is much better than last season. The Orioles are a gimme, so we don't have to talk about that. But, you look at Pythagorean wins from last season, and 6 of the best 14 teams in baseball were East Coast teams. So it just seems really daunting. Like they're going to have to do relatively well against, I would say, like the Mets and the Phillies to try to get over that number.
Here's where I struggle with this. And, you mentioned that the Marlins are a much better team. I think they're a really strong team. They have a good young rotation that I think people continue to undervalue. Like Zach Gallen no longer on the team. That hurts for sure. But there's some really strong guys in that rotation, and they have some legit power in the middle of that lineup. If Jesus Aguilar can be half the player that he was, that's a huge home run threat there. If Corey Dickerson can stay healthy, that's another big power bat there. For this to hit the over, they need to win, at a minimum, 41% of the games that they play this year. I'm not even asking for 500. 41% of the games they need to win to hit the over. I know it's a tough division, but we're talking about a Red Sox team who I still don't think is going to be competitive at all. The Baltimore Orioles, that's a gimme. Good park. There's some good ballparks that they're going to be playing if they play the AL East. Like, I just think that if you were asking me for them to be a 500 team, sure, I'll take the under on that one. We're not even asking for 500. We're asking for a losing record, and they still can hit the over on this one. I just think, and you're getting even money on this, on the over, by the way.
Yep.
I don't hate it at all. I just think there's a lot more potential on this team. Even Brian Anderson, I didn't even mention him. There's a lot more potential on this team that people are giving them credit for, and I think they can squeak out 25 wins.
Yeah, I mean, Alfaro, he's someone who was a top prospect like 2 seasons ago. Maybe he turns it on this year. It's weird. You can kind of use this as both a positive and a negative, depending on which side of this debate you fall. Because you're saying they have to win 41% of their games. It's nuts that it's in this season, unlike seasons in the past, one win is the difference between 2 or 3 percentage points at this point.
It really is, yeah.
If they win 41% of their games, it's 25 wins. If they lose 67% of their games, suddenly they only have 21 wins. Like it's nuts how much this can shift just because of a single fluky outcome in a game. So you could say, yeah, maybe they luck their way into a couple of wins, and as soon as they do that, they're probably going over this number. But you could also say if they have a couple hard luck losses, or if they split a 4-game series against the Orioles, you're like, uh-oh, they needed those wins.
Right. I'm just going to throw this out here too. If there's a team I'm actually not excited about, and I think could actually underperform, it's the Braves. I really think the Braves are a team that can underperform. The heart of their lineup is fantastic. There's no doubt about that. I don't think their pitching staff is all that strong. I don't think their bullpen is all that strong. And basically, once you get to the bottom half of that order, and this is a thing for a lot of teams, don't get me wrong, they're weaker than they were last year. So I think
100%.
if there's a team that could underperform, and people seem to be a lot higher on than I am, it's the Atlanta Braves.
Well, if you go by those Pythagorean wins I was talking about before, I think they were a 97-win team last season.
Yep.
They exceeded their record by 6 wins. They were one of the luckiest teams in baseball. Now, 91 wins is still a really good total.
Right.
But
right.
As you said, I think you could make the case that Soroka, who's still a more like contact-oriented pitcher, like he was amazing, don't get me wrong, but I think in the grand scheme of things, you always want contact suppression more than anything else from a pitcher. If he's your best guy, yeah, maybe it does fall off pretty quickly after that. And then you lose Donaldson too in the middle of that order. And
right.
Like you said, now it only runs 4 guys deep, not 5 guys deep. And that is a pretty big difference.
So now that we're kind of talking about these, win totals and all that, one of the other storylines that's going on with this, as teams are getting ready to get to workouts and all that stuff is that we have players opting out, just like we have in the NBA. It's also taking place in the MLB. Ian Desmond has basically been the face of this. He put out a statement, talking about the indifferences in the world, the coronavirus pandemic. He's got a pregnant wife, all understandable. There's been a few players that have followed suit. We have Ryan Zimmerman and Joe Ross sitting out for the Nationals. Mike Leake, who's probably doing the Diamondbacks a favor, is also going to be sitting out for them. When things like this start to happen, and it feels like overall, I feel like there's a lot of question marks in the NBA about players wanting to play. I don't get that sense as much in Major League Baseball. This seems like a sport that really wants to come back and play, where the NBA has kind of had more of that storyline here. But as we move along here, as these things come about, does it scare you off on taking some of these totals? Because this is obviously something that you have to kind of keep in the back of your mind now, which is not something we've ever had to deal with. Injuries can happen. That's always part of the plan. Yeah. But this is something that players can just drop out, and that's it. They're done.
Yeah.
Does it go through your mind at all?
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit last time I was on the podcast, where maybe this wouldn't be a season to invest as heavily as you normally would into totals. And I still think I kind of stand by that. There, as we just talked about, there's some numbers I like, and there's some numbers I'll bet, but I'm probably not going to go as heavy as I would normally go because there is so much uncertainty. I mean, heck, we still don't even know where the Blue Jays are going to play. Like the season's 21 days away.
Right.
So these are some of the hurdles we're still having to clear for Major League Baseball. Yeah, look, I completely back any players that don't want to play. It's their right to not play. I can totally understand why they wouldn't. But I do think sort of the argument we often have with baseball as well is, and it's usually centered around the Angels and Mike Trout, which is like, how do you have Mike Trout doing Mike Trout things and you don't make the playoffs continuously?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, one player means a lot less in baseball than it does in pretty much any other sport. So barring, a massive superstar walking away, which I don't know if that's going to happen just considering how much money they'd be walking away from.
Yeah.
It just seems like it's a little less impactful in baseball. And you're right. I don't think we're going to see quite the level of people willingly walking away on their own accord. Although I think it is important to kind of note, I think the National Basketball League Players Association came out today and said they've gone through their initial round of testing and like 7% of player tests came back positive, something like that. And if you use that as sort of a barometer for baseball, that would be about the equivalent of 85 to 90 baseball players across Major League Baseball testing positive, just because there's way more players on a baseball roster. So the likelihood of us seeing a couple big name notable positive tests is still on the horizon. So yeah, might step off the totals a little bit, but there are going to be a few, I bet.
Garion Thorne, as always, thank you for joining us on the Panel B podcast for this week. We'll be back next week. Who knows who I'm going to be co-hosting with? It could be Garion. At this point, I'd actually like it to be Garion, but we'll take that 1 week at a time here. As always, appreciate you coming on, dude.
No problem, Steve.
I'm Steve Buchanan. Check you next week.